Chris is joining us from Virtual Gaming Worlds. They've certainly been one of WA's biggest success stories in this space. So it's so great to have some homegrown talent presenting here with our international guests.
I'm from overseas, by the way.
But he's in Perth today, and it's a Perth company, so let's go. Yeah. And then from Coincast, doing the panel for us today, we've got Tessa and Katie. So thanks so much for presenting today.
No worries, please.
And Yat, thanks so much for joining us in from Hong Kong. Definitely, I know you're always sort of presenting. I've been on presentations with you at midnight, I think, from time to time. So yeah, it's great to be able to see you again and for dialing into our Perth audience.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks for the introduction for everyone. Just for the viewers at home, we are live, guys, so no swearing, please. Can we kick things off with Chris and give a little bit of a background about what you guys are doing, which is a great introduction on what Mary and Jade are doing? We'd love to hear more about Virtual Gaming Worlds.
Yeah, so Virtual Gaming Worlds has been around for about 7 years, roughly, in various incarnations here. Started in Perth. Primarily, the company's focus has been online gaming, mainly in the US, social casinos, poker games, that sort of thing. I head up as the product owner in the incubation department, and we've started looking at new technology and new ways to kind of open up new markets and get new audiences. My background's in video games for a very long time. So one of the things we started looking at in particular was the intersection of gaming to blockchain. As Lee pointed out, early adoption comes from audiences like gamers. They're willing to go through the pain points that the average consumer isn't. So we target them and make a fun game. If they come along, eventually we can get them across. The same way you guys have done actually with the casual mode, which I thought was a great idea. How can we solve these problems? How can we get these people into trying and adopting new technology and then opening it up? So we've played around a bunch with a bunch of different products, one of which we went live and then killed, and one of which never went live, we killed it before then. Mainly because the way we approached it from the start was it's going to be fun for the consumer. And exactly. But a lot of it was discovering the new technology of what are these pain points that developers are going to run in. We're not looking at from it as a platform developer. We were looking at it as game developers. Like, if we're going to build a game, how are we going to get it up on Steam or the Epic Store or any of the existing products? What would the equivalent be for the blockchain? And then we obviously ran into lots of issues with that.
Great. And Yat, can you give us a little bit of a background about what Animoca Brands is doing? You guys have been making a few waves in the industry lately. What are some highlights that you can pick up?
Yeah, so very quickly, Animoca Brands is actually a public company in Australia. So we're listed on the ASX, focused on very much on the intersection of gaming and blockchain. We started off as a mobile games company focused on brands, hence Animoca Brands from a naming standpoint. And I think today, I guess the highlight of the business is we are probably the one maybe public game company that has the largest numbers of digital brands in our portfolio, over 300. So that includes brands not just like Formula One, but also like Marvel at this point, sort of DC Comics, so Avengers, Spider-Man, and so on. And sort of our big goal that we've been sort of pushing towards is to invest heavily in blockchain gaming, particularly in non-fungible tokens. So we're big believers in this space. We had the good fortune to be sort of on ground zero when CryptoKitty started. So that was sort of how we ended up sort of getting exposure to that space. We also ended up becoming early shareholders in Dapper Labs. And we have multiple blockchain gaming projects out there. Sandbox is probably one of the more high-profile ones, like Minecraft type of thing. And then, of course, our Formula One car did make some waves when we sold the first one for over 400 ETH, and we've had subsequent auctions as well. So, and very soon we'll be also doing, the Star Trek items as well, together with Lucid, which we're also sharing.
Great, thank you. On that, I think one of the first questions that we wanted to start with, you mentioned Marvel and Star Trek. What are some of the unique kind of user experiences that blockchain offers in the gaming space that you could talk to yet?
Well, I think previously it was already mentioned, but one of the big areas of focus for us obviously is non-fungible tokens.
Yeah.
The thing that excites us about non-fungible tokens is the provenance of the items, right? When you think about collectibles as an industry, like, maybe some of you might be too young to remember, but eBay, particularly eBay's early start, actually wasn't collectibles. Craigslist wasn't collectibles, or even Amazon. These are all collectible industries. People basically gathering things, and as a form of a game as well, things that they love. In fact, I think in the very first sort of IPO documents, when eBay went public, they said the dependency of the business was dependent on Beanie Babies, as to how well Beanie Babies would sell. This was of course in the late 90s, and we have a sort of certain version of that now with blockchain as well, which we saw with CryptoKitties, and now with other sort of digital collectibles. So what we see as an interesting, exciting opportunity is, can we take real world? Because one of the challenges that blockchain has today is, at the end of the day, there's still less than 40 million wallets out there, right? So there's a very small segment of people that are on the blockchain so far. And of that segment of people on the blockchain, there's an even smaller segment that is actually actively engaged in digital items, digital collectibles like NFTs. So how do we expand that? And the expansion of that, we think, will come through famous brands where we can onboard essentially people from, let's call it the old world, into sort of the blockchain world, as it were. And so this is where interoperability becomes sort of what we love about this is interoperability and provenance on items. So if I have a sword, in which the utility is exactly the same, but it happens to have 50 kills, or it was owned by Imports Champion, the value of that goes up. So the concept of play to earn becomes really interesting. It also means that game companies have to start thinking about vested interest of players and not simply looking at content as a form of making money and essentially running their game economies like Venezuela, but actually more like a real economy. So we think these things are super exciting, and we think this is the future of games.
Speaks to a lot of what you were mentioning before with the swords and fractionalization. Opening up to the other panelists, did you have any comments on that, especially talking to user experience?
IPs especially, I found, I moved into free-to-play games when I was first starting, I should say, not starting, but moving out of Asia into the West in particular. And one of the biggest things we saw at the time I was working with EA on FIFA, which is a huge IP, the ability to sell collectible cards that represented players that you could use in the game was a massive selling point, because you had people who already invested in players because they were football fans, and now there was a game that they were fans of as well, and you had that cross of, I bought this card pack, I opened the card pack, it was exciting, and I got Ronaldo or whatever, and we sold 5 different versions of Ronaldo in the game, because there was Ronaldo when he played for Team A, for Team B when he was 18, when he was 22, like, there were all these different variations that, if we could have taken that to the auction level because it was a tangible thing that you could think, we would have made even more money than we made, assuming we solved all the other barrier problems. But that first step of, there's something I'm already invested in old world, I like that concept. Star Trek, Star Wars, whatever, that's something that's external to, that brings new people into something that they're willing to play around with and try with, because they've already got some sort of investment in it.
Yeah. And on that, going similar to what you were saying before, I was actually having a discussion yesterday with Dota versus League of Legends. When you have a collectible and the ability to move it off game and to merge with other games in something like the international that's on at the moment, is it possible, it is possible, using NFTs and using collectibles to kind of bring in multiple audiences from multiple games into one, and then increase the value based on whoever wins that tournament and then on sale?
That's actually a really interesting problem on 2 sides. So from a technical side, the NFTs kind of solves that.
Yeah.
As long as you can import it, great, that's done. But games are about the feel and the balance. And Dota and League is a great example because it's basically the same game. I mean, one ripped it off from the other and did slightly differently. But how their balance are, the stats of the characters, the skills, all those things mean they're no longer able to cross across. But do the users really care so much? Are they invested as much in the skills and that it's 4 instead of 5, or is it more the style and the theme of the character? So if you brought a League of Legends character across and the abilities were called differently, the stats were different, but they still played the same, then you wouldn't have that problem. And I think that's where you get opportunities for the various companies to actually go together and go, hey, this is a situation where we can both win from this, and to solve those problems, because they become design problems more than technical problems. I'll be really interested to see if anyone does that.
Yeah, agreed. I think the other thing maybe I want to add on this is that I think the opportunity for NFTs becomes on sequels or other games funded by the players. So, for anyone who would have, imagine if World of Warcraft was on the blockchain, those millions of players had their items in it.
Well, that's
how many
Ethereum started.
That's right? But how many other game companies would suddenly make compatibility available for these World of Warcraft items? How many game companies, if Fortnite skins were portable as NFTs, would start making games using these Fortnite skins, right? It was obviously, we think thousands of them would adopt it. And so the value would increase as a result for everyone.
And we see some of this already in the real world when you look at the classic Capcom fighter games. They've got Marvel characters with whatever other fighting game Capcom's got out and then merged them all together. Nintendo does the same thing. Smash Brothers is the example where you've got your Zelda characters with your Mario characters. We can see the consumer already wants to take the different IPs that they like and they love and put them together in some other format. So there's a market for sure.
Yeah, that leads nicely on to the next question. I guess in terms of the influence that blockchain is already having on the gaming industry. I mean, we've seen blockchain shake up the finance world. We've seen blockchain change the energy industry with what Power Ledge is doing with peer-to-peer trading. We've even seen people like Nestle and Walmart using blockchain to track letters. So what kind of influence is blockchain having on gaming right now? Are we seeing the likes of PlayStation?
Not really.
No.
A lot of it is still a wait and see. Because the gaming industry is very different in how we build our products, no one really wants to take the risk and be first. So there's lots and lots of small companies making small games. We haven't seen a lot of the big players, EA, Activision, Ubisoft, putting big money into it and really looking into it. They've all got small teams that are investigating. Ubisoft did 3 events, I think, this year, where they actually invited developers who've been playing been building stuff on the blockchain and paid for them to go to France. And they basically got them together for 2 weeks to just do big brainstorming sessions and see what they could come up with. So a lot of it is still trying to work out what are all the problems going to be, how are these guys going to solve it, before they put a lot of money into it. Odds are, knowing how the industry is, they're going to end up buying a bunch of companies that have actually solved it and then pump more money into it. That's what tends to happen.
And do you see the influence more so on, the esports games or more of your World of Warcraft type style games?
I think what we'll see is it'll initially come in on the esports side of things for the consumer, especially because skin trading is already existing and it's illegal and actually against most terms and services. So they'll be able to come in and legalize that. So from a consumer point of view, you can play to win, or play to earn, I should say, and no longer risk getting your account back, which is always more positive for people. So we'll see that side of things first, I think, and that's also in some ways the easiest way to get into it. Actual games that are 100% interacting with the chain, where you've got items, auctions across, so World of Warcraft with their auction system, for example, I think that's quite a ways down the line still. Mainly because we've got the tech to do all of that at the moment already, and the way a lot of these companies all think about it is, why change when it's going to cost them more?
Jay, did you have something?
Yeah, actually, it's a very interesting topic, actually. So we agree with you a lot. We will see that the gaming industry is quite different from the West world to East world, to be honest. Because in the West world, there are a lot of creative developers, very massive creative small studios. And the people, the consumers, they value the experience and how the content in the games. But in the East field, especially the Asian world, the channels earn most of the profit of the gaming industry. So probably we believe that the most possible place to change is in Asian market, especially like China. For example, Tencent, they earn most of the money in the whole industry. So people have more intention to change the situation. And it's the same in the financial field. It's like Libra, for example.
Yeah.
Probably they will take place of the countries who do not have the strong currency back. So we believe and in terms of NFT, actually, Japanese people, they are probably the most crazy collectors in the world. So we believe that this business will take place and run operation in the Asian market first.
Which I agree. I think that's a really good point. I mean, we saw this with free-to-play games. You know, in Asia, free-to-play came out of it because of piracy issues, and it was around for 10, 15 years before anyone in the West even considered it. And then they tried it and it failed in the West, and then we all moved into Asia to learn how to do it properly, and then brought it back. And I would not be surprised if the same behaviour occurs again.
Exactly.
Coming out of China and Korea in particular, leading the way in that, and getting adopted.
Maybe to add quickly, so I agree with everything here. I think one of the things about adoption here is if you look at the mobile gaming era, right, which is basically between, when we first started taking off between 2010 to 2011, 2012, none of the big gaming companies did anything mobile. They flirted it and looked at it and said, that looks interesting. But they were most worried about sort of how it could potentially also disrupt their business model. Because before, I would sell console games or PC games for 30, 40, 50 bucks. And suddenly there was this 99-cent or $1 or $2 product. And the concern that they had was, of course, that it would cannibalize their business because they didn't imagine that the market audience would expand. And I think the same, was with mobile, it actually expanded the space, and console games sold more than ever before because more gamers went into mobile, and then a percentage of those gamers decided, hey, you know what, actually I want to have a different gaming experience, and expanded the space. And it's the reason why the gaming industry basically continued to grow despite the fact that there was recessions and financial crashes. Actually, the game industry continued to grow because the audience expanded. So we think the same will happen with blockchain as well. But the paradigm shift is less about sort of a hardware shift, but it's more about a paradigm shift in value. And so game companies used to focus around entertainment and fun. Now we think the future of game companies is about delivering values to players. Right? And this is different, right? If you talk to a game designer and say, well, actually, you have to design a game where players can earn money or develop value. That is basically a really big change in the way you design games. In the same way that designing games back in 2012 was for a small screen. You used to design games for a movie theater type experience, and now you say, make that optimal experience for one hand, portrait style, when you're in the subway. Right? That's the same kind of concept. So we think the same, in that sense, we think history is repeating itself.
Yeah, very true. I mean, you probably have heard the term, games as a service, especially recently, it's been batted around a lot. And that was that mentality shift of box product to now we want you to keep playing it longer and longer. And game teams went from 200 people down to 5 or 6.
Yeah. And on that, on the technology that's kind of involved in mobile gaming with blockchain, there has been some players moving to blockchain phones. Is that something that is required for integration with blockchain games on a mobile at the moment, or something that needs to evolve in terms of security, like your question before?
I don't think so. So the stuff I use Trust Wallet. It integrates straight to the web. I hit buttons. It's a pretty seamless thing. The biggest barrier with, I think, on the phones is actually how discoverability.
Yeah. Most
people, when they still look to put something on their phone, don't go on, open a browser and type in Google and try to find it. They go to the App Store and look for it. Yeah. And Apple and Google just block everything like that. So if Apple and I know Apple is looking into it. They've got a research team that is looking into bringing that in. But if those guys open up for the discoverability, or we get better at our marketing and get people to do it in browser, that'll solve those problems.
And what about dealing with kind of the energy load? Or does a blockchain game require more energy? Is that still feasible on a phone with its battery life? Or
it's no different.
Agree.
Yeah, it's the rendering of the game itself. So I've actually made a game that if I flipped my iPad over, I could cook an egg on it. It got that hot.
Yeah, quite warm.
Obviously didn't ship that at the end of that state, but we were just pushing what the hardware would do. It's a hardware limitation, and we know how to solve those problems. It actually gets easier every year with new phones.
Exactly. And we have all discussed about why don't we integrate with hardcore games first, or as the mobile market is so competitive. But still, we believe that for blockchain game is still on the early stage. So if we do mobile game, it will lower the cost for a trial. So it is all about balance.
Okay, and what are some of the other types of pain points at the moment in blockchain gaming specifically? You mentioned before you created a new rocket protocol to deal with some of the congestion that you see on chain, which happened with CryptoKitties famously when they launched in the Ethereum network. suffered a little bit. What are some of the points that you've noticed? You mentioned some in your presentation before, Mary, that you've seen in some of the problems or solutions to combating these.
Yeah, we believe actually the technical issues has already been conquered, or it's not the biggest issue, to be honest. Money can solve every technical solutions. So, but the real issue we are facing is we need more playable and more interesting contents, or more big IPs which can generate more common consensus. It's the same in the virtual, the VR game too, like the Pokemon Go. Why they are so popular is not because it's playable, it's because people love these IPs. So actually we think it should be the same logic in the blockchain game. Blockchain is bringing more financial values, more technical breakthroughs, but still people are looking for something interesting and can bring value to them. So yeah, we are educating, or we are talking to more developers, more creative studios to bring more interesting content into this area.
Yeah, I 100% agree. But it's got to you've got to have a fun product before anything else. Once you get people into the game, the pain point I found when I've done a lot of focus groups and stuff has been saying to someone, "Great, you've got something that's worth $100." They go, "Great, can I have $100?" You go, "Well, you just got to put it in your wallet and then sell it to this guy on this exchange." And they go, "What?" At which point you can't sell it to them. That has to be such a smooth transition. Like even creating the wallet is a huge barrier for a lot of people. And it's not that hard to create a wallet, but we have to get to the point where we can, one button, click it, your wallet's already created, because they've already put in their email and their password, because they're used to doing that. The analogy I always think of is Amazon when it first came out. You told anyone I'm buying something online and they looked at you like you were an idiot, because it's not safe, it's the internet, they're going to steal your credit card number. Most people don't even think about it now. Like most people couldn't tell you what their credit card number is because they've looked at it once, put it into their machine and forgotten about it.
Yeah.
It needs to be that equivalent. It needs to be that smooth. And the only way we'll ever solve that problem though is by getting people in and everyone going, "This sucks," pointing at something and then, okay, now we solved that problem for you.
Yeah.
I agree. I think, like as mentioned earlier, but I think the incentive to the player is the most important thing. The technology will follow. I mean, if you think about, anyone who bought a console and set it up in their home, it's about 20 minutes, right? Maybe 30 minutes, which is probably longer than it takes to set up a MetaMask wallet. So, like in the context of it all, actually, it is, why am I going to the store, buying a console, setting it up, spending all this money, finally to play a game? It's the incentive, because I want to play Spider-Man, or I want to play this fun game, or I saw something cool about it. So the work to do so was not a problem, because the rewards seemed obvious. And I think that's the biggest challenge, we as an industry, not just for NFTs and blockchain games, but we as an industry for blockchain need to solve, right? And the incentive earlier was, I can get rich with Bitcoin. So that was an incentive. Obviously, maybe not the right incentive for some, but that was one example of that incentive. And so, as mentioned earlier, whether this was IP or brands, whether this is about financial reward, as long as the incentive is there, we can bring adoption.
At the end of the day, it's a game, and if you build something fun for people to play, they'll jump the hurdle, like you said, they'll set up their console.
Actually, sorry to interrupt. So actually, in the retail market, people are already doing this. Like customers can get paid back if I create something. No matter I create the selling revenue or anything, or I contribute to the community, I will be rewarded. So actually, it will be the same in the game industry. So players will be rewarded incentive. That's the same.
Well, I guess we've kind of already touched on this now, but from a development perspective, I guess we've gone from fun being the top of mind. Who's going to play this game? It has to be fun. I don't know if anybody else remembers the Game Boy Color, and when you're looking for a game in the store, it was what's the latest or the funnest cool game. Now it seems like with blockchain, developers are now going to have to start thinking of other things. And you were mentioning that the logic of a developer has to change in your presentation, and how they've now got to consider a token economy. So I guess, does that change the ingredients of success of a game, and how does that compare, the ingredients of success of a traditional game versus the ingredients of success of a blockchain game?
Right. It's a very good question. So actually, we have already talked some part of it, like how to incentive the different players. And so maybe I think there will be two. One is in mind, like the producers. So before this, especially the Asian producers, they are just thinking like Tencent. They're thinking how to have customers to pay. How can get the money from their pocket more and more again and again. They are just doing this, keep repeating. But after that, if they realize the blockchain, the token economy, they will realize that we have to share the revenue profit with the communities to incentive for the players and create something really valuable for them. So this is from the mind. So in terms from the token economy designing, so they will spread the customers layer by layer. Like we will have the C's customers, maybe some of them are investors, they are original blockchain users, and then have the community to spread and to design another like marketing or campaign things like this. And also the focus of the producer will be different. So before this, they only focus on how the users are feeling, pure feeling. I feel exciting if I kill someone, I will reward it. I want to earn this and that. I will purchase this and that. But after that, if the token economy is a whole system, it's integrated with a lot of different parts, they will know how to balance the whole system. Like we are building a country, for example, you have to put different parts, different players, and you have to balance. The designing mind will be different.
Sounds like there's a lot more factors to consider.
It is, but it will be a lot of fun to discover. Yeah, for producers.
As someone who's had to build economies, fun's a dubious word at times. I agree. Like the way you approach it is very different, and the way you approach a casual game like Candy Crush or something like that, you really don't need to worry about the economy very much. You're just looking at hitting certain points. But if all of a sudden the rewards you get at those points have real world value and can impact things, you actually have to start looking at the design in a much more complicated way. And we'll see a lot of the methodologies you see in online MMOs, Eve being the classic example of that, where they actually have professional economists involved in it, change how you set these things up. And it is going to be very much how you set and develop it, as well as how it gets balanced, because the classic example would be, I've got a sword +2, and it goes out, and great, everyone's bought the sword +2. Well, now I've got to put out a sword +4, now it's going to be 6 +8 to keep adding value to it, because stats go up. And that doesn't work for a game that you want it to last more than 3 or 4 months. And there'll be a lot of people who come out, and that's what they will launch. They'll be come out 6 months, the game will be gone. Anyone who's invested in it will have lost their shirt on it. Because that's what's going to happen to begin with. It's going to be risky for the early investors. But the people who do it properly and take the time will set up their system so that it's going to be more about the item, not as much about what it can do that gives the value.
I agree. I think one of the key theses is that we work on is the fact that we don't think the value will be in the game, in the gameplay, as much as it will be in the development of the item. So we think of games as containers to add value to the items you own, rather than the game itself. And so this is obviously a big design challenge for a traditional game developer, where you suddenly have to think about developing, not just making money for the company, but actually making maybe earning value for the player, and having to share that value as well. And sort of, going from an inflation-based game design to essentially the game design where, that cannot happen, where you can't nerf your own economy. But I think the largest and biggest challenge, but really also think is the biggest opportunity for that, is changing games, what used to be sort of walled garden and closed systems, into entirely open and interoperable bases. So we think of sort of what NFTs offer, essentially almost like open source of content. And in the past as well, coding was closed, right? People would never share their code with others because that was considered just special sort of sauce. And now suddenly, if that code can travel everywhere, or in this case, if items can travel everywhere, what does it mean for the items when they traverse somewhere else? Can you actually sort of control that? And in fact, you can't, and maybe you shouldn't control that. And in that environment, how do you manage that? We think it will give rise to all sorts of new opportunities that we can't even imagine. But obviously, this is the part that we probably think will find the most resistance with classic game developers.
Great. I only have one more question before we open it up to the audience. In terms of advertising models within blockchain games, because blockchain transactions allow you to track everything so clearly, what kind of advertising model are we looking at within these games? Is it different? Is it the same? Is it more beneficial to advertisers? Is it an incentive for them to get involved?
I don't think it actually changes anything.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tagging done for be it in-game ads or external ads for acquisition and stuff. Like we have a lot of data on what people look at and how they do things already.
Yeah.
I mean, even
Actually, I think blockchain make the advertising model even worse because you have no idea who is looking at this. So yeah, to some people, yeah.
yeah, sorry, yeah, I was going to
Sorry,
say,
sorry.
I imagine we'll still stick with the same sort of tagging we're using, be it Google tags or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, even 20 years ago, we knew exactly how long someone saw an ad in game every time they went around a circuit in Need for Speed. We knew like 3 seconds on the screen, therefore we got this many eyes and impressions. And I don't see, just because it's on the blockchain, changing that.
There are things with blockchain and advertising which is paying people to watch that. So there's those types of incentives that could be integrated as well.
Yeah, I don't think that'll actually make a difference because
Yeah.
even now, when you integrate AdMob or AdSense into your products and you get a reward for everyone doing it, they actually don't care who does it. You
Yeah.
don't send them any data. It's all anonymized. You know, GDPR in Europe especially is putting an end to sending any data. All they know is this product had someone click on it for this long and they went through and put these things. They really don't know a lot of information about the person watching it. And we've seen it actually happen as people put it in the ad comes up on their phone, they put the phone down, they go get a cup of coffee and then come back and go, great, I got my reward, they keep playing.
Yeah.
It really is. It's just a way to get eyes on it and it's a crapshoot really. And they can give you all sorts of stats on how many people look at it, but if you say, well, give me specific data on it, they really can't have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at sort of the advertising industry, what you're describing essentially incentivized sort of use is no different than incentivized installs in the early days of mobile or incentivized other things. And while that was good for an immediate instant effect, it actually ended up, in this case, sort of perverting the data because people weren't actually watching or using the content because they wanted to. It's because they were incentivized to do so. And so that sort of targeting of incentives, I don't think will change. Right? So whether you're a blockchain game or whether you're a traditional game, you want to target a customer who really wants your product.
Yeah.
And essentially that principle I don't think will change whether this is blockchain or not.
It's the external acquisition side of things that'll be the most interesting. And that's the same problem with Google and Apple and Facebook for advertising, which are kind of three of the big ways to advertise.
Yeah.
They don't allow you to advertise anything blockchain related.
Yes.
So in some ways, I think it's going to force us to go back to older school technologies of trying to get acquisition.
Yeah.
You know, maybe running print ads, I don't know. Or working out new tech for opening these things up.
Sticking them in the back of the toilet or...
Yeah, buses.
Yeah.
May I agree totally. So, maybe I think why the model is not that effective is because not enough data or not enough traffic. But in terms of the customers, it's a very good thing. So like I can use my time to be paid back actually, or use my attention to be paid back. So yeah, I think advertisement industry is will be changed in the future for sure. But still, they face the same problems with the games, like how to generate the customer scene.
Yeah. So we'll open it up to the floor now. Has anyone got any questions for our panelists?
So I come from a traditional developer background, and I was wondering, are there any resources out there to help me sort of look at using this in games that I develop?
My memory's crap, so I can't remember. The guys who did the zombie blockchain game, I want to say Plasma was one of the things they put out. I can't for the life of me remember. I can look it up though. They're based on the Ethereum network, and there's a zombie. Basically teaches you how to code blockchain, making a little zombie card mapper. There's a bunch of stuff like that out. Medium's got a whole bunch of articles on it. The CryptoKitties guys actually published all their source code out, so you can just go and have a look at it.
I think the thing you're referring to is the Loom SDK.
Thank you, yes.
Yeah, so they have a software development kit which uses sidechains to create scalable games and get back to the main Ethereum chain.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really simple stuff like that out there. It's in fact that's what we started when we started building our stuff. I had a bunch of programmers who knew how to do it, but we basically spent a weekend and went through it all together. Because all the different chains are slightly different, but there's a lot of fundamental rules that you have to learn to begin with. And once you got that, then you can pick up the others.
Yeah, that's more advertisement here.
Yeah,
so,
I was gonna say.
our Rocket protocol is actually going to be open source. So why we build up this is because we don't want the developers like you to learn the small contracts from the beginning. So actually we have already finished the blockchain sites for developers already. Like what do we do with Ground Hunter? So they are traditional developers, and we help them to reverse this into pure blockchain game. So you can look up the website for the white paper, and you can contact us so to see whether we can cooperate in the content directory.
Down the back, Joe.
Okay, I'm going to try to frame this correctly. Hopefully I can do it well. Gaming for real world problems. So Scotland Yard had a problem. Their policemen, this is honest to God's truth, policemen were padding their expense reports, losing lots of money. One of the accounting firms said it'd take them 1.5 years, 2 years to figure it out, so many people. So they put it out there as a game. 100,000 people signed up, and they solved it in a month, okay, using gaming. Now, with the advent of blockchain technology and the ability to pay, gaming could easily be used this way. And there's a lot of smart people that play games, all right? And how do you guys see that? Is that something that you can create and do, or is that just out there in the ether?
No, I actually think it is a potential opportunity. So the SETI program is a great example of that. Everyone who has a PS3 or now PS4 could just install it, and it ran in the background when it wasn't being used, and they were using your device for processing power.
The processing power, yes.
Yeah, so great. We chip in, some tokens for you for every hour that you get, and it's free basically for the person doing it. A more sort of interactive example was the CDC wanted to test how diseases spread, and they contacted Blizzard and they purposely put a disease into World of Warcraft. And they peaked it around Halloween, and no one knew this was being run. And it ran over 3 weeks, and the data they got for it was really interesting because people have these characters that they're attached to, and they're not real people, and if they die, you resurrect, big deal. But people didn't want to have a disease. They didn't want to die from this disease. So they ran and tried to heal themselves, and then you had a group of people who went, oh, this is funny, I can spread this to people. And they went off and did it that way. And they got a lot of social data actually about people's behavior out of it. And that sort of thing, if they had actually come out and said, sign up for this program, every time it happens, it's like signing up for a medical trial in some ways without having taken drugs with side effects, right? Gamers in particular, if you go to them, hey, I'll give you $1 for this, or free, it doesn't have to be tangible, free game time in the program that's running it, you'll get droves of people signing up, and so you'll get volumes of data from that sort of thing. Having people actively try to solve a problem will be harder, but blockchain potentially help with that because you can credit actual people's work.
Yeah.
And that will be the really interesting one, because that in some ways could potentially allow high-level collaboration of gamers into outside game products. Solving math problems would be a great example of that one.
We call them POA, proof of action. You can POA, proof of action. So you can record every
Power of
action.
attorney is how I look at it, but okay.
No, sorry?
Power of attorney is how I look at it. But
Yeah, we're going to have to change all our acronyms.
Yeah, I know.
Just realize that. This will be a big problem.
So that could do it?
Yeah.
You're thinking of those concepts.
Sorry.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I just
yeah,
had to
yeah.
say yes. Okay.
Yeah, were you going to say something before on that? Or?
Yeah, maybe I'll quickly add. I mean, gaming as a force for good. There's a great talk by Jane McGonigal, if you could search it up on TED, where she basically talks about sort of how if you were to activate the minds of gamers, which are obviously in the billions, to solve sort of public good, you would solve all the problems in a matter of minutes, right? So it's an interesting, fun talk, but there is some relevance, as was already mentioned earlier. But I think it's already happening inadvertently. Like how many people, for instance, learn about history because they play games? Right? How many people understand economic models even pre-blockchain because of simulation games, whether this is SimCity, or there's this sort of some kind of economic game or so. So this is already happening, but it's not happening necessarily as a mission. And to your point, right, when we start getting to sort of designing games with purpose, I think that becomes quite powerful.
Any others? Lee?
Yeah, I just thought I'd add one quick comment here is that obviously Blockchain Centre and what we're doing with Digital X is we're always trying to work with companies, understand their business problems, and see if blockchain can be of use. Whereas today we've got 3 gaming companies that are all saying this is how we're actually using blockchain today. So it's it's an awesome feeling to see the presentation here today. And, I know it's not the biggest event that we've ever had, but yeah, it could be.
But online,
we do
viewers
have
at the
online.
moment, you never know.
Yeah, but it probably could be one of the most important in terms of groups that are actually using it and getting tangible value. So yeah, really want to say thanks for everyone for their presentations today.
Great, great. Did anyone else have any other questions before we round things out? Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you, Blockchain and Digital X, for hosting this today. To the lovely panelists, thank you to Chris from Virtual Gaming Worlds, Jade and Mary for your presentation for Mixed Marvel, and of course to Yatsu for streaming in from Hong Kong.
Yeah. We'll give them a round of applause.